It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers with you, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. Well, we made it. We made it through the full moon. The moon is still full. It will remain full through the 10th. Okay, because the moon phases last 3.5 days. And contrary to what some people on the internet say, moon phases last 3.5 days. The moon changes signs every 2.5 days. Astrology and astronomy walk hand in hand. Okay. We split in the 18th century, but we walk hand in hand. And there are still astronomical things people need to understand, but I'll leave it there for right now. I'm going to talk about some of that because we're going to talk about squares and oppositions today and understanding how they're your superpowers, because we had a great conversation with the astrologers from my website, wokeastrology.com. Yes, it is to keep right-wingers away. I've specifically named it that way back in 2019, 2020, sometime then. I don't remember. But anyway, so I did it on purpose to keep the QAnoners away, because I was fine being undercover as an astrologer and being referral only. But then I noticed the astrological world that I had already had kind of a contentious relationship with anyway, because well, those are just old stories. But I noticed so many went down the right wing path. So few stayed, at least objectively, you know, independent. And so I decided to give a counterpoint of view, because I am a progressive evolutionary astrologer. I've been working and moving patriarchy out of interpretations for 30 freaking years. I ain't going to stop anytime soon. So if you don't like it, lump it, head out. I'm not going to be all high vibe. And I will never tell you we're going to have a time where humanity splits between those who ascend and those who remain. I'm never going to do that, because to me, that's the least spiritual thing you could do. Okay. All of us, it's up to us to guard our consciousness. Every single human being, Lindsay. Not liking it, not being high vibe, and to the people who think I'm supposed to be apolitical. There's a huge difference between being nonpartisan and apolitical. And I'll talk about that in my monologue. Okay. But for now, let's look at what's coming up. We've got that full moon starting off the week. It started to form on the 7th. That's when it formed full, and then it stays full for 3.5 days. That full moon's going to be hitting Saturn. That's something you need to know about. I'll be doing what's in the headlines for patrons. So if you want that, you're going to have to head over to the Patreon. And all supporting patrons get that. So you're welcome. And you can thank the subscribers for the Awake Space Astrology magazine. And they're the deep dive tier, deep dive in horoscopes. That is the $15 tier. So they are the ones who sponsor that. But the astrologers of the round table, or the because we game together as well with the wonderful, wonderful DM Andrew, who has been an astrology student of mine. We talk astrology before we game, and we record a bit called the Astrologers Roundtable. And I thought I'd insert that because each one of those astrologers reads astrology professionally for me at wokeastrology.com. And I thought you might want to get to know them a little better. I've had Susie Evolutionary on the show. Damien did a patron only with me. Shelby's been on the show. And I want you guys to get to know them, because we have this cool conversation about squares and oppositions and how they can be the doorway to your superpowers, not just your challenges. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then you guys will get to watch our recording. It's not that long. It's like 30 minutes or so. But anywho, and it's a great conversation. You get to see the different aspects of each of the astrologers and their philosophies and how they interpret, which is beautiful to me. Yeah. So last week was interesting. We did get a bit of a breather up until the 4th, and then I promised you everything would start to take off. And then Uranus stationed retrograde on the 6th. And then we had the full moon / eclipse on the 7th. I made a couple of TikToks where I explained it's not an eclipse unless it's visible where you live. And some people had a hard time wrapping their heads around that because Tumblr and Reddit have done so much to contribute to the body of astrological work or undo centuries of research and development. And people are like, you're confusing astronomy and astrology. No, I'm not. Okay. An eclipse is it's about visibility. Okay. The full moon the phase lasts for 3.5 days, but an eclipse is about visibility. Now, 85% of the world saw that eclipse, and I have a very wide listening audience. So if you were in totality, which was a great amount for from East Africa up into the Arabian Peninsula, skirting up into Central Asia, including all of Asia Minor into, well, not all of Asia Minor. The Levant got partial, but all the way down into Iran, India, into Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Korea, etc., all the way down into the South Pacific, Asia Pacific region, and then to Australia and New Zealand and Antarctica for the lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse is a full moon. And if it isn't visible where you're at, then it is a full moon. Okay. Full moons are powerful enough. I don't know why everybody wants the exceptionalism, but they seem to. So if you were ever wondering where I stand on things, well, I am progressive. I don't really align with either party. I will vote to play chess, but I am not a fan of either party or corporate interests, really. I'm a fan of the people. And Lindsay had a problem with that, according to her comment on my Spotify. I wasn't high vibe enough. So if you're looking for high vibe and fake spirituality, or what some people call white women spirituality, that ain't what you're getting here. Okay. There's a huge difference in elevating your consciousness so that you can be open to possibility and not living in the doldrums and being fake as fuck. Okay. We don't do fake as fuck on the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. And Mars is sitting on my moon and I'm feeling spicy. So I'm not even going to pretend to play nice on this one. Spirituality has nothing to do with being fake. You want to be high vibe, that's okay. But what most people are doing is bypassing. They're not actually being authentic in their emotional states or in their consciousness. They're trying to ignore la 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 instead of saying, I see it, I accept what is, I can see what is. And in my present moment, this is my reality. And I can be of more use when I'm in these mental spaces, emotional spaces. My hair is driving me nuts. I washed it and I can't do anything with it. But anyway, so if you want to sit and dance naked around the maypole under the full moon, have at it. But other than giving people a show, come on. That's not what this show is about. We are going to look into your consciousness and how you can use those squares and oppositions to advantage. I think that is going to be really, really helpful. Speaking of squares, that Mars on my moon is starting to square my Mercury and my Sun. So I plan on getting exceptionally creative. Exceptionally so. So it doesn't mean it won't be uncomfortable, but it's usually those uncomfortable bits that really rev our motors, or as Abraham Hicks says, sends off rockets of desire. The point is not to avoid contrast or challenge or obstacle, but to see it for an opportunity for growth. And there's a huge difference between that and la 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 when it is okay. Alrighty. Get your tea, get your coffee, get your matcha, get your water, get your beverage of choice. If you're down under, you probably want something warm because it's going to be wet and chilly as we move through the next couple of days. You probably already figured that out. Alrighty. whether we're walking to the park, whether we're taking the kids to school and doing school drop off, if we're commuting to work, we will get perfect parking. We will find everything we need this week. Things will come to us with ease and flow. Whether we're folding the towels, matching up may your socks match up perfectly, and may your hangers stop reproducing. Whatever we're doing together, we're going to do it together here at the Awake Space. I told you I was feeling spicy, and I am. That Mars on my moon, it makes me want to fight people. But I'm not gonna. I've got better uses for that energy. What am I talking about? Remember when I talk about our layers of consciousness, and each of us move up and down those, and we can be deliberate in them. So the first is our instinctual nature. Sometimes it's that spicy self where we want to pick a fight, or we want to be in self-defense, or we feel like being aggressive for no reason. That's instinct. That's instinct. And then we have our social programming. Okay. Our social programming. That's the second layer of consciousness, where we've been indoctrinated with social and cultural beliefs about and behaviors. Somebody says hi, you say hi. Even in our anger isn't always instinctual. If you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off and you give them the finger or the fist, that's, I'm allowed to be angry. They almost did this, or this person caused me to. It's usually where we're deflecting, or we're on a robotic behavior. So a lot of times that's where most people live, with descending into the instinctual, which honestly, descending into the instinctual is great if somebody's chasing you, or if, a cougar or a bear sees you and they're coming at you. It's probably good to have a little adrenaline rush. But if we're living that way under circumstances we can actually control, then it's actually causing our body physical harm, because we're getting all those stress hormones when our life isn't actually at stake. Those hormones are there to give us a burst of speed or extra strength or things like that. One of our patrons had a layoff coming that had been in discussion for about a month. They got their layoff notice on Tuesday. They had another job by Thursday. Partly because they were prepared, but partly that adrenaline rush, they were deliberate in it, and ended up with a good result. But their immediate response was instinctual, because when you lose a job, you feel like, oh shit, right? And it's easy to go there. It's okay to go there. You don't want to stay there. Okay. We can be deliberate and work our way up. So just like I said, oh, I'm spicy, I want to start a fight. I'm like, not the best use of my energy. So let's make it more productive, right? The next level, the third level, I like to call it transcendent. It does not mean more evolved. It does not mean that you're more enlightened than anybody else. It means you're being deliberate. So it's really less of a state of being and more of being deliberate and making decisions. Where am I going to operate? Am I going to choose the social cultural programming? Am I going to try something different? Am I going to dip into my instinctual consciousness? That's the point of choice and decision. And when you can wield your consciousness deliberately, you've got a lot of power. And that's something that's so important to cultivate. And when we're looking at astrology, we look at the different layers, at least the way I teach interpretation. We look at the different layers. Mars is not always aggression. Mars is action. Okay, so Mars is on my moon. I can pick a fight, Lindsay, or I can decide, what can I do with this energy? Well, what is actually angering me right now? I have to ask myself that. Why do I feel like I want to pick a fight? Well, I've been a little disappointed with people's ignorance lately, because I've spent my life studying, and I realize not everyone has the privilege of a high IQ. It's not always a privilege. Sometimes it's a privilege. Sometimes it helps you make bigger messes and greater problems to solve. But I've always had an easy time learning. So I have privilege in that. One of my lifelong struggles has been um, dealing with people who don't want to learn. They just want to repeat or regurgitate or parrot or argue in willful ignorance, that's and that actually does trigger my instinctual consciousness, because I'm like, oh shit, as a species, we're doomed. I'm okay if people don't know and they're willing to learn. Like, being ignorant just means you don't know. It means with further investigation, you can correct the ignorance. I'm ignorant about things. You can only know what you know, right? So there has to be a willingness to explore. And what gets me, this could be a rant. What gets me is when well-grown people, adults, use early childhood learning experiences or lack of learning experiences as an excuse to remain ignorant. Or, well, I had a teacher who was mean to me when I was 8 years old. If you're 35 and you have car keys and a job, you can start researching. That's how we overcome those obstacles and hurdles. We go, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, you are not the boss of me anymore. And you may have said I was slow, or you may have said I'll never be an engineer, or you may have said blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Screw you. I'm grown. I'm going to go to the library. We have that ability. Okay. We have that ability. We don't have to sit in the wounding. And we can then tell our younger self, hey, look, I'm a grown up now. Come along with me. We're going to go to the library. And you know what? I'm going to go look at those engineering books, but I'm also going to go to the kids section. Let's go pick out our favorite book from when we were kids. And look at that, Grover. There's a monster at the end of this book. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to feed my inner child. And I'm going to go check this thing out and see if I actually want to learn about it. Period. We have so much ability to learn. Each human being is capable. Now, how people learn may be very different. Some people may be audiovisual. Some people may be kinesthetic. Some people may need to be shown how to do things. I'm a mix. The universe thought it was a really good idea. Hey, Laurie, we're going to give you bad eyes and make you a visual learner, and you're going to be kinesthetic with very bad motor skills. So I got to do stuff and experiment and learn as I do it. But I'm also visual, and I learn well by reading and then applying. So luckily, I like to experiment. So, I'm willing to make mistakes. That's a good thing. That's a blessing. But everybody has different intelligences, and intelligence is governed by both Mercury and Uranus. Okay. Uranus is not as personal. Okay. Mercury is very personal. It's about how our brain actually functions to input and output information. Retrograde Mercury does not mean that you are going to be slower or learn differently at all. Okay. That is not what that means. Some people will find that to be true, but there's plenty of people who are dysgraphic, dyslexic, etc., with Mercuries that are direct in the chart. So don't let your placements be an excuse. Okay. And we need to build accommodation for ourselves. I'm always here to encourage people to learn, because the more you open your mind, the more interesting life can be for you. You can make headway on your goals in a different way. You can see new pathways for yourself. You can unstuck yourself. So there's all kinds of different ways to learn. And we see that with our Mercury. Now, the higher octave of Mercury is Uranus or Uranus. And it went retrograde on the 6th. And Uranus would be more, it would be the collective consciousness versus Neptune's collective unconscious. It is insight, innovation. It's rebellion when someone is against society or marches to a tune of their own drummer and society hasn't caught up yet. So it's that vanguard of thought, but it's associated with revolutions. But we can be evolutionary thinkers. It would fit into that genius, and everybody has a genius. And this is more like collective innovation, because there's a 7-year period that Uranus is in a sign. So everybody your age will have Uranus in the same sign, like within a 7-year period. Okay. So, but on an individual level, where that placement is, it's that activity in life that opens you up, right? That opens you to your genius, So, first house Uranus people, they've got to be physically moving, tactile, they'll get insights. Second house, it would be innovative in resourcing. They might have unique ideas about security. Third house Uranus would be like truly like these are people who get downloads, like they get, I have an idea, it isn't necessarily the although it could be, but it'd be like, I have an idea, popcorn brains, right? And learning how to channel that into directions that are productive for you would be important. Fourth house Uranus, and these are natal placements I'm talking about. Fourth house Uranus would be somebody who came from a different family. It doesn't necessarily mean it was a chaotic family. It could have been, but it could also be somebody, I see that sometimes in people whose families lived outside the cultural norms. So sometimes we see Aquarius on the fourth house cusp or Uranus in the fourth house when people are different than their neighbors. It could be everybody is evangelical in this neighborhood, but you're Buddhist. Okay. It could be something like that. It could be you're highly into education when most people are not. It could be the opposite. It could be you're in a college town and you're like, I'm going to be a carpenter. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's something different and you like to live differently. You might like to live communally or have different structures in your family. As an adult with car keys and a job, I'm not talking about your childhoods, okay? Fifth house is a unique kind of creativity, like a genius when it comes to playing games, sports, how you raise your kids. There's this connection, this electricity, this interest when it comes to that being different and wanting a different kind of lifestyle. Um, and how you can't be you can't do normal humdrum stuff and feel vitalized. You've got to have something different going on. If it's in the sixth house, then you're looking at different kinds of employment. You might have a very, very sensitive nervous system and you can't have too much stimulation happening in your physical environment. So you might have been an early remote worker long before COVID if you're older. You might have a need to be physical and tactile, so you might be one of those people who's kind of always in motion. And you may be very, very inventive in the workplace. Like you're the go-to person for solutions in the workplace. You might have a very unique job. So, you might be like somebody who does, oh God, I had somebody with that and they weren't just a forensic accountant. They were like in a specialized field. Then, seventh house, if you have Uranus in the seventh house, you are a genius at looking at contracts and agreements, and you're good at finding different kinds of solutions to meet people's needs. You may not want a traditional relationship. You might have been raised to have one, but you may not want one. But it doesn't mean like it's, swinging or something. It could be, but it's not judging it, but it's not so much that, but you're looking at innovating those friendships, close relationships, working with really unique clients, anything you're in agreement with where you sign on the dotted line. Eighth house would be you maybe just a genius when it comes to investing, depends on the sign, but investing, you might have inherited some psychic gifts from a lineage. It could be that you've always been able to see dead people. You might have always been able to see or feel or sense energy. It's not always see. It could be any of the clairs. You have a knack at finding the right answer for problems, and if you're doing research, etc. And then, and it could even be like you work in intelligence. That I've had several clients who are from the intelligence world that had those placements. Ninth house, you learn differently. It doesn't mean you have a learning challenge. You may have been diagnosed with that, but you may just know stuff. You might be more connected to certain subjects than others, and you think differently. You are so open to innovation and change and thinking differently and jumping down rabbit holes, and you have no problem expressing your ideas either. Whether or not other people understand you is another story. But if you were in marketing or if you were a teacher, you have a unique way of getting through to people, and you'll find a way to get that information in. You might be really fun um, as a teacher or a coach or somebody in a helping profession of some kind. 10th house, you have unique ambitions. You may have had trouble with authority when you were younger because people would have automatically felt a challenge from you, but you're there to kind of innovate structures. You're there to innovate the systems. And so you might have a unique business or a unique talent or ability to bring people to the table. You're quite good at leading by getting people onto the same page. And it might take you a minute because when you're younger, that might come out with, screw you, old man. 11th house, you would innovate through community. That would be bringing like-hearted people together. That could be really understanding the needs of community and kind of like you understand the social system so you can nip things in the bud. So like avoid drama before it starts, like set the structures up so things move smoothly. You could innovate third spaces. You might have a collection of very interesting friends or colleagues and knowing people from lots of different walks of life. And then 12th house, again, this is very, very intuitive. This would be somebody who maybe always had um, precise dreams, or maybe always somebody who could hear, feel, know from their higher guidance. But you could also have been challenged. People may not have, may have thought that was really weird, and you may have had that challenge. If you have Uranus in the 12th, your genius really is in your connection with the all that is and understanding the internet. Yeah, internet, not internet, interconnectivity. Okay. So Uranus being retrograde by transit doesn't really impact our natal Uranuses unless Uranus is making an aspect. So if it's conjunct, and that would be somebody who's quite old now, about 84, 83, 84, or if it's in a sextile, and that could be to Aries or to Leo, Uranus and Leo, or in an opposition, or actually, let's go to the trine first. So if it's to Aquarius, which um early Aquarius, and that would be what, like, or late 90s, and or Libra, that would be in 1969, at that 10 to like 2 degrees, or if it's in opposition, which would be Sagittarius. And so um unless it's in those spots, and if it's not really making aspect, it's not really, I mean, we could look at the square as well. So sorry, the square would be to Virgo or Pisces at 0 to 3, 4 degrees. Okay. So we probably feel a little less wired. I think people might have felt a little bit tired and almost discombobulated with Uranus moving retrograde this week. And it's in full retrograde motion now, and it will be, oh gosh, it spends about 4.5 months retrograde. So it won't be direct until like 2026. So it'll go back into Taurus in October, and we'll talk about that on another program. But you may be feeling a certain kind of way. I slept. My sleep schedule has been so off ever since Uranus moved into Gemini. It's been like high wire voltage, or high voltage energy. So it's like, whew, and it's giving us a time to calibrate. So it's not a bad thing. Direct doesn't mean good. Retrograde doesn't mean bad. It just means the way the energy is operating. We got a taste. Now we get to calibrate. Okay. So take a couple days to rest while you can and just breathe through it. This week we've got the moon conjunct Saturn. Let me pull that up. I should have had it ready, but I didn't because I've been fighting with recording. So let's see. So yeah, by the time this comes out, well, by the time you're listening to it, it's probably out before then. So we're the 8th of September. Yeah. So Saturn's at 29 degrees. About 2 something p.m. the moon is conjunct Saturn. And it's moving into that conjunction. So we could see some things happen in regards to espionage. We could see some issues at sea. Not sure what's going on with that flotilla headed towards Palestine, but we'll probably get news of something. We could see more stuff happening in the Caribbean, Red Sea, Straits of Hormuz. I expect issues with boats and navies because Pisces. But we could also hear some things about world leaders. And so don't get your hopes up. But that's what I've got. So systems are being reworked. And a lot of times when people hear that, they're like, yay, but it's not always a yay. Things are being reworked, period. Don't put a good, don't put a bad. It's time for you to rework your internal systems, okay? As much as I said, hey, release the worry, release the doubt, what are you going to put in its place? How are you going to build a system for your faith and trust in self? Okay, so that's something you want to work over the next couple of days as the moon continues to move through Pisces through the 8th of September. And then on the 9th, it pops into Aries and it will be conjunct Neptune. That might be more of where we see those naval battles. If you want to know more about what I expect to see in the headlines, you can head over to the Patreon and hear the What's in the Headlines that I put out as a patron only podcast. And remember, if you're a patron, I know I put out a lot of content. You don't have to consume it all at once. You can listen to it at your leisure. If you can make it to a live that I do, I did a bunch of early morning ones last week. I did one evening one on Saturday. And if you don't do the FOMO thing. You catch it, you catch it. You don't, I'll put replays up. I don't replay every single one. If I'm super non sequitur, I don't put it up. If I've been good about reading the comments, so it feels more community oriented, I put it in there. So anywho, that's what's up on deck. All right, let's do some patrons shout outs. Speaking of Patreon, we're going to read from the list of our newest patrons and thank them because we are 100% listener supported. No ads. I take no ad money. I don't take sponsorship money. We are 100% indie and we are supported by the members of the Patreon. If you're not sure what Patreon is, it is a platform for creatives, artists, podcasters, filmmakers, game modders, you name it. I've met some incredible creators through the Patreon Ambassador Program. I've met geologists, paleontologists, math teachers, people who do 3D printing of D&D characters, radio play producers, podcasters of all kinds. Just amazing creative people. And it's a way for us to fund our work. And so I love being 100% patron supported. I love being listener supported. It means the world to me. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, check out the show notes. All right, let's go do some patron shout outs. All right, it is time for patron shout outs. Here we go. Gotta get to there. Hang on. There we go. Here is our newest members. We've got Kylene, Mel, Joyce, Jason, Nicole, I'm Amber, Amanda, Flora, Baker, non-Baker, Angela, Heidi, Serena, Danette, Heather, Cavaldi, Megan, Maria, Jody, Amber, Gloria, Kim, Leah, Cleisha, Ori, T, or T White, I should say, Stephanie, Nikki, Emily, Stabby Unicorn, Amber, Marliza, Paige, Jen, Gunawan, Denisha, Ethan, Lindsay, Flappy Beaver. That is very funny. Lauren, Brooke, Deda, or Dieta, Andrea, Divine, Sammy, Pre, Lisa, Norman, Michelle, Jillian, Champagne, Becky, Holograve Cosmetics, Nathan, Mona, Nadia, Carly, Kirsten, WP, Jessica, Lisa, Megan, Lori, Brianna, Becca, Megan, Claudia, Bailey, Sonia, Summer, Shania, Trine, Carolyn, Courtney, Jen, Catherine Marie, Jackie, S.A. Ortiz, Nicholas, Vanessa, Alex, Jonas, Brittany, Hope, Jenny, Katrina, Carmen, The Heathen Equestrian, Hillary, Cynthia, Melody, Carmen, Heather, Albano, Hannah, Ryan, Vermicelli, Athena, Sacha, Alicia, Alicia the Cynic, Paloma, Caitlin, Vilma, Jorge, Kale, Jacqueline, Star Sister, Cameron, and Nicole. All right. Thank you so much for being patrons. I really appreciate your support. And if you want to become a patron, check out the What's in the Headlines and other goodies that happen. Check us out. All right. Up next, let's talk about squares and oppositions. Hey, I thought I would answer a question off the Spotify comments because it goes really well with the squares and oppositions because of how a lot of people online and even in some books talk about the challenges or the challenging aspects or the good aspects, the good and bad thinking. Because this question was really heartfelt, and I think a lot of people have the same question. So let me get to that here. Let's see. So this is asked by C, and that's their username on Spotify. Question about the houses and signs from within at birth and time sense. Is it like where fate has chosen the life experiences we would have to a degree and our responses to those experiences, or is it more fluid than that? Like it was destined in my chart at birth that I would have a lot of trauma as a kid, but not given how specific it would be or from whom, correct? Or is it more of a destiny of who we are as persons and our wiring for that mix or both? See, that is such a good question. And I somewhat responded to you on Spotify and I was like, hey, I'll answer it this next Monday. Almost forgot. So I was like, oh, wait, I want to answer that question. So here's the deal. There are people who will say, yes, your destiny. I don't see it that way. As a progressive evolutionary astrologer and someone who had from birth trauma, I was born with a birth defect that forced an infant surgery. And then I went through CSA from toddlerhood until my teens. And so there were people when I was a young person. That's one of the reasons, astrology was one of the tools that was thrown into my face because I was seeking answers. Was I really fated for that? Was I really destined for that? Or was it just an accident? Was it just the result? Somebody made decisions and I was there, right? And sometimes it's easier to think it's fate, right? Because if you're just a hapless victim, you were just the one that day. That can feel really shitty too, right? So I've studied many, many things, astrology being one of those things. All right. So when I was working with a spiritual teacher in my early 30s, and remember, I'm 56 now. When I was working with one of my spiritual teachers, I asked that very question. And one of the people sitting in front of the teacher said, well, you made a choice. You chose that before you came in. You agreed to it before you came in. And I had the guy up against a wall before you could blink because I was like, there's no way in hell. I cannot believe in a God, a universe that would put a small child at that much risk for some twisted, sadistic purpose. And nor did I want to believe I was so special to survive because there was something wrong with that. I'm human. You're human. I don't believe that some humans are more important than other humans, right? Just like I don't believe all dogs are better than, one is not better than another. Not all cats. They're all different, right? And they all have equal values, as do humans. Okay. And after they got me calmed down, and by the way, they did not judge my reaction. There are a lot of people in spiritual circles who go, oh, how could you do that? And our teacher laughed. He was like, well, now we've learned how not to talk to people because it was also a healing space. And when people are up on healing, they are raw, they are gritty, they can be reactive. And so my teacher was like, hey, here's what it is. When you incarnate, and know is a loose word, okay? Because we're talking about energy condensing into matter, okay? So we are spiritualized matter. We are energy condensed into physical matter, right? Which is on one hand an illusion because we're still vibing like the quarks and neutrinos that we are, right? The particles. But what we know is being physical is a dense reality. And we know that young beings, young human forms, young animal forms, young plant forms, young mineral forms, okay, are vulnerable. Okay, they're vulnerable. And yet we come equipped. And he used to say it was like walking in a swamp with a 70-pound backpack on. And you are fully equipped with everything you need to make it through the swamp. And that young, vulnerable beings are often the victims of uncreative choices. Now, I didn't like that answer either when I was 30. Okay, I thought it was glib and I thought it was skirting the issue. Then about 5 years later, while I was in my garden and I was pulling weeds, which a weed is just a plant where you don't want it to be, right? And I was pulling these seedling weeds out of my bed of flowers and vegetables. And as I pulled it, that sentence came back to me, like the memory of his words. Sometimes young, vulnerable things are the victim of uncreative choices. And I realized as I picked the weed, I was making an uncreative choice for that weed. It was a traumatic experience for the weed, right? Which is just a plant we don't want where it's at, right? And I went, oh, he was trying not to say destructive. He was trying to soften the thought forms and thought processes I had created or had help creating through really bad psychology in the 80s. And he was trying to make me a little more receptive to the healing process by not adding and compounding to the resistance, which was justified. Okay. So in your astrology chart, it shows all your potential. It shows any potential harm. It shows any potential healing. And the very aspects, just like the conversations we're going to have in the Astrologers Roundtable, those very aspects that can look to show damage can also show the healing path. We human beings are so able to heal to whatever degree we can heal. There's a willingness, there's a capability. It's kind of like the perfect storm, right? There's no race, there's no comparison. Okay. But did you deliberately pick that chart? Were you destined to always have trauma? No, that wasn't your destiny. It happened. Your destiny is to have a human experience that can include any range of experiences. And with choice and deliberation, we can make them more appealing through deliberate choice as adults with car keys and jobs, or at least autonomy. And that's why the fate or free will argument I don't think it's discussed properly. I think they kind of come together, you know. I think there's an element of fate and I think there's an element of free will, but if we've never been taught how to use our free will, then things often look like fate. That's why I talk about the power is in the noticing and the perfection is in the correction. And that is a lifelong liberation process. But I wanted to thank you because it was such a beautiful question. And I started my journey asking something very similar. And there's no magic wand, there's no magic bullet to healing, but there are proven tools, techniques, and methods now that did not exist, back in 95. So I hope this helped. And just know, yeah, you didn't pick it. You didn't pick it. It shows the potentials. So I like to say the possibilities and the probabilities. And I see in young people today, when I read for people in their 20s or their late teens, I see the same aspects that would have shown debilitating trauma in people in my age group and up. So Gen Xers, Boomers, greatest generation. And in these young people, it's creativity. They may have had some trauma, and it's not comparison, but they have more tools. They had more access to therapy, better tools. I've seen young people clear 0 clinical markers before the age of 30. That was unthinkable just 20 years ago. So it's not a destiny thing. Let's put it this way. We can see with better tools and equipment, we can turn that around. Now, if you're my age or in that age group that didn't get those tools, or forget age group, if you just didn't have access, because some of us don't get access, just know it's available now. And that's part of using our free will, is to find the tools that work best for us. Again, there's not one solution that's going to be perfect for everybody. But I really hope this helped. And that was a really beautiful question. Thank you for asking it. Well, you can be spiritual and swear, and you can be spiritual and play tabletop role-playing games and video games, and you can be a baker, a candlestick maker, a crocheter, a knitter, an equestrian aficionado. You could be a classical violinist. You can be a jazz guitarist. You can play a mean nose flute. All of that doesn't make you spiritual or not spiritual. And the astrologers at wokeastrology.com and I get together every single Friday to do some team building and play a couple hours of a tabletop role-playing game that's a lot like D&D. And beforehand, we talk shop, and we've started something called the Astrologers Roundtable. And I shared some 2 weeks ago with patrons, but I thought you might really enjoy these conversations where we talk about squares and oppositions. So when you're learning astrology, especially out of like the commercial books, but even at some astrology conferences, a lot of times they go with the very old school malefic and benefic in aspects. And squares and oppositions are seen as malefic, which means bad or unfortunate. And trines and sextiles mean, they say that's benefic and that's good and you're blessed. Well, I noticed as a young astrologer doing many readings on clients that a lot of the people who had a lot of squares and oppositions were actually really, really creative people. And depending on what planets were making aspect, that it wasn't always the doom and gloom that had been expressed in the books and by various teachers. And then I also noticed that the people who had a lot of sextiles and trines didn't exactly have the lucky life experience attributed in the books. And I knew that from my own personal experience. And I have a pretty balanced chart of, squares and trines and sextiles. Um, And I went through a lot. And what I noticed with people who had a lot of the benefic aspects, it doesn't necessarily make them blessed, as in nothing bad ever happens to them. It actually shows that they've got a lot of energetic support to make it through. Whereas people with a lot of squares and oppositions are super creative to move themselves through things. So squares and oppositions, a lot of times, are creative aspects that are superpowers. And yes, we can see trauma in the chart. We can see where you've been accident prone or you had illnesses, or maybe your childhood could have been a little more supported, to put it mildly. And yet when we're grown people, car keys and a job, we have the ability to take a look at that energy and say, how else can it express? Now, this isn't bypassing, this isn't denying that anything happened. But with those experiences, you also gain skills, and that ability to dodge and weave, that ability to take the frustration, or instead of internalizing the tension, you can turn it into a piece of art, or you can turn it into a creative process in some kind. Maybe it's the best spreadsheets you've ever had. Maybe it's a physical work of art. Maybe it is through singing or writing, depends on what is happening in that chart, which planets are involved in that. And so I thought I'd ask the astrologers how they help their clients utilize oppositions and squares to open doorways instead of remaining in the past. All right, we have another Astrologers Roundtable with Astrologer Susie, Astrologer Shelby, and Astrologer Damien. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh wait, that's the Muppets.
That's the Muppets. I love
the Muppets.
As a Gen Xer,
too.
yes, please.
I'm so okay with that.
Right.
I used to be Gonzo. Now I'm one of those guys in the balcony.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Statler and
Move them
Waldorf.
off stage. Anyway, so our topic of conversation for the next little bit is about finding the opportunities in the chart. And because I think so many people focus on what's wrong with them, right? Like, why am I, this way? Why am I so this way? Why do I have this kind of anxiety? Or why did these bad things happen to me? And yeah, we can see all of that in a chart. But with experience as an astrologer, you'll know those squares, those oppositions, those interesting conjunctions we can have sometimes, depending on the planets. They're also our route to healing. They're our route to abundance. So I just thought, what have been some of your big ahas as you've been learning, or in the past, if you've had more experience in reading for people and being able to help them unlock their understanding of how what appears to be a challenge can also be the opportunity. So, who wants to go first? Don't make me edit this.
Yeah, we jumped right into it.
I will jump into it because we were literally.
Wait, did I go through? I just.
Oh, did you? We missed you.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I just said I was gonna jump into it. If you want to go, Susie, you can, but I guess
Oh no, go ahead. I didn't hear you. There might be a delay. Go
Oh
ahead.
no, yeah, maybe. I got a new laptop recently, yay! So it can run way
Yay.
better when we're playing and gaming. Well, when I see somebody's chart, I see it through potential lens. I think the problem nowadays, especially online, is like fear creates engagement and negativity creates engagement. So
Mhm.
it's a matter of really redirecting like the content that you are getting, like in terms of from astrology, and then understanding that like, yeah, there are challenges and frustrations we deal with every day, but we can work with it. We can take whatever pain may have been caused to us and make it our power. Knowing that you're not doomed is what like extremely vital in terms of that's the biggest thing I think so far. Is just like everybody has different challenges, but everybody has their own unique solutions that really fit in with their birth chart and like how to
Mhm.
overcome and how to
Mhm.
grow. And
Right.
it's never going to be overnight, and growth is a lifelong journey. So it's not going to be perfect. And I know Virgo needs to take their advice because, like, I have to tell myself that a lot. It's just like, it's not going to be perfect, and you need to just do the best you can. And if you have moments where you do fall, you just pick it up and move on.
I love that. What have you noticed when people have like some solid squares in their chart? What has come out to you for that?
I mean, I date someone with a bunch of squares in their chart, and he's extremely creative. He can just like freestyle things out of nowhere, and
Mhm.
just has just a very vibrant type of a personality. And I mean, people with squares, it may feel like a lot of tension, but it is also creative energy, depending on like, what's where it is
Mhm.
sitting in what house in your chart.
Mhm. Mhm. Exactly. The planets make a difference.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Mhm.
And you're not doomed. Again, I really can't stress that enough because I think this like doom and gloom, the end is near kind of talk is just such a common thing. So
Mhm.
knowing that you can work with what you got. And
Nice.
I'd say I'm glad that like we don't put too much emphasis on stuff like detriment and fall and this and that because people like
They will
like
hold
it's
on to that
yeah,
and run with it like it is their
exactly.
full identity. Yes.
And like your pain
Yeah.
doesn't have to be your identity.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Yeah. That's really important. That's beautiful. Suze.
So I was saying right before we clicked on the recording that so I was with my members tonight and we were talking. We just started intro to deconstructing stereotype versus archetype.
Mhm.
And while there's a crumb of truth in each stereotype for where it started, it is the extrapolation and the exaggeration to kind of explain away someone's bad personal experience. And while
Mhm.
with a sign, and I think that people hearing, so a discussion came up where somebody said, well, I'm a Scorpio rising, so I know that I will always have to have struggle and darkness. And I was like, no, 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 no. So this is exactly right. So while, we can look at a Scorpio rising, and I actually said, Glorious Scorpio rising, like healing is possible. And like, please, but my
We don't have to blow up. We can glow up.
right. And that's the thing. So the phoenix
1000%.
doesn't always have to be on fire.
Mhm.
And so we use that example, and it is listening to the languaging that whoever is presenting as an astrologer, and I'm going to full on use those air quotes, their language is
Astrologer.
important. Even if somebody claims to have 2 decades or that they've been, if they are still using the languaging around their personal experience with their personal placements, around any other placement or any sign, people who make top 3 and top worst, the 3 worst signs to have the 3 worst
Right.
moon, that is all red flag languaging. And so I said it tonight, it's probably every 3rd session, which is a lot over the amount of years that I have had, that somebody has brought up to me in a session, well, I know that I have this, so I'm always going to have that. Or if somebody just
Right.
says to me, I'm having my Saturn return in this sign, so all the astrology girlies are like, oh yeah, that's divorce. I'm like, it's your Saturn return's not even happening in a relationship house, like, so it
Right,
doesn't.
exactly. It's in the 3rd house.
The houses,
Podcast.
when you are listening, and the signs are the easiest to slander. Think about it.
Right.
If you're listening to anyone with real astrological knowledge, who practices, who's ethical, they're probably also, you're hearing them say squares and oppositions and trines. They're talking about houses. They're talking about all the other layers of astrology, because the signs are not the end all be all. And the stereotypes are easy, sloppy, bad writing, and pointing out the negative, because that is all those people have. Or
Right.
it could be somebody who's, maybe I always say there doesn't have to be a bad guy. It could be somebody who's a good person, but they are, like Shelby said, you don't have to, your pain doesn't have to be identity. If they are still only working through their pain, and that is the lens of how they had an experience with one sign or another. I have seen people who have more than a decade, who have full-on practices, say this is how to get this out of a sign, or this is the top 3 worst moon signs to have. It's called an archetype because every sign has an arc of its, right? It's, and we're not supposed to be at our healthiest expression at 10 or 20 or 30. It, again, Shelby said, it's a journey, right? It's an ever evolving. We are evolutionary astrologers, and we don't have to assign ourselves to anything. Yeah, we don't. And that's the biggest part. Like, whatever we are at 20 or 30, and I was talking about the modalities, like, it's not better to have any more fixed or any more cardinal or any more mutable. Listen, the slander of mutable signs are flaky or indecisive. They're malleable. And one of the laws of living is that the only constant is change.
Yeah.
Malleable is never going to be bad. Right? Like, yeah.
Well,
So,
none of it is. And fix actually makes change happen.
Sure.
Every single
and they have
one
great
of the
follow through.
Every single one of them makes change happen.
Sure.
So it's like, there's a lot of misunderstandings around those. How do you help clients see the opportunity, and like how to take what has been a challenge? Because you're a trauma-informed astrologer. So part of your work is often helping people walk through their journey. How do you help people kind of tip that story?
First, seeing that every placement is also a tool. Any challenge that is presented is a challenge to motivate you to have that arc, to have that growth. And every single placement holds a very valuable tool within it. And so I was just doing a chart, and it was a little bit of solar return, because you get to the point where it's like, okay, what are we doing? So like, maybe it's a little bit of solar return, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And we were looking at somebody who'd maybe gone to school for one thing and life had changed so much. I personally think it's ridiculous that we put 15 and 16-year-olds in a cafeteria and make them choose their career for the rest of their life. Job fairs can go suck it.
With a big loan with high interest rates.
I like, for real. So anyway, but this person spoke so eloquently at a young, all of this stuff. And I was saying, this thing that you went through, the environment in your childhood that maybe felt like a deficit, or like you weren't getting what you saw at a neighbor's house or whatever. That is your superpower that makes you understand how valuable it is to be heard, to be seen exactly as you are, with unconditional, right? And so like that is something that we can use towards career. And I do love finding that sweet spot that like satiates your soul. It has your natural talents. It honors how you deal with money, your money mindset. It's always layers, right? It's never just going to be one piece of advice or whatever. It's working on, it almost becomes like coaching, right? So like we're working on money mindset. We're looking at your strengths, and it is always something that they don't feel like is a viable career, or that a wound could be something that could be worked into a viable career, but it's the skill set that we grow so organically and we value so deep. Anything we value, is usually easy for us. And so learning that sweet spot, but yeah, people who think they won't have healthy relationships or just, and it is the code switching. It is the different way to look at it. It is flipping you're somebody who understands the value of being seen and heard. And you can get high off your own supply. You don't have to wait for another person to come give you what your family couldn't. And I love using that. Get high off your own supply. You do not have to wait for somebody else to give you the approval, the acknowledgement, the I'm not disposable, because everybody else, okay, well then you stay for yourself. You stick into something. You don't change because somebody else needs you to be something else so that you're not disposable. Like that is all. Anything that looks like a wound, which obviously that's, I can see those things in a chart, is also your superpower.
Right. Absolutely.
But while everybody else and the whole world and bad actors on social media.
Right.
Sorry, my
Lean into the damage.
My Aries moon and my Cancer Mars are up right now, but all of those people.
That's partly why I'm bringing the question up, is because of recent events with that press conference with the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and a lot of powerful people. A lot of the conversation has been, they're forever broken. I was like, oh, Jesus, I get legally why you do it. You do that for legal reasons, but on the healing is always possible.
Those are your best advocates.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought, we can, and it's having squares and oppositions doesn't mean automatically.
My chart's full of them.
Yeah. But so we're some of the greatest artists of all time. So we're some of the greatest musicians of all time.
We're also good in crisis. People with a lot of squares.
Right.
The challenge is not, it doesn't feel weird. I think other people feel the tension. I don't know. I had the squares from the time that I popped out. Right. So
right, exactly. I don't really feel anything in that tension pattern in my own chart. Because I have a couple strong ones, but they're your superpowers at the end of the day. 100%. So that's why I wanted you guys to talk from your experience. Speaking of, let's hit Damien, because it's game night. That's why we're the Astrologers Roundtable, and our wonderful GM Andrew is down there. And I'm trying not to take away too much time from the game because he's great. Alrighty. Damien, what's your hot take?
My hot take is something that a client said to me this week, and I love what they said. Frame it like, what's the next best step? Right? You've run into a challenge. You have some transits coming. Maybe you have some gnarly squares. Maybe you have some oppositions. What is the next best step? These transits are here to teach you something about yourself, and you will learn and you will grow. And because of that liminal third space that's created through those creative aspects, you discover something about yourself that maybe you didn't know you could do or were capable of. And in the moment, yeah, sure, it's stressful. It's like, oh my God. But for people with squares, obviously, they're like, oh yeah, I have a dear Scorpio friend of mine. And when Susie, you and Laurie were talking about squares, I don't notice them. I'm like, I bet you that Scorpio sun friend of mine has just riddled with squares. Because I'll give you an example of her favorite day ever. She was working at a cafe. Somebody had cut themselves deeply. The kitchen stove was on fire because of grease. And people were like having a conniption fit, and she was handling it all. She was like, apply pressure here. All right, we're going to get the antiseptic. Please bring out the baking soda. We're going to put the grease. She was like, I'm having a great day. And I'm like, she was calm, quiet, cool. And that's the other side of a square. That's the other side of an opposition, is that calm sense of knowing, that energy that comes from going, oh, that was the step. That's where we're going with this. And then on the other side, you're just like, during it can be crunchy, like for sure. Like, oh my God. My 2020 was just like, hello, squares. How are you? How about those interesting conjunctions? But you grow and you become so much more than you were on the other side. So I would say if you're looking at like challenges, reframe it in your mind right now is, what is this next step taking me towards? Who am I becoming instead of what I was? What am I on the other side of this now as it's coming up? And we as astrologers can show you that. We can show you all that. The liminal third spaces of the squares, of the oppositions, have magic in them. And even the conjunctions too.
Conjunctions can be very transformational.
Exactly. That Saturn and Pluto conjunction
Jupiter
in Capricorn. Was it like a vice? Yes. But did it make diamonds?
My Saturn return.
Yeah, girl, you had it rough. You had
that year,
craziness.
All of you who had your Saturn returns that year, I was like, these are spiritual masters, because that was a lot.
And then shortly after, I found you.
Right. And Mars was square all of that. From Aries.
Wild.
Crazy.
That's why that summer was like it was.
Yeah. Oh my God.
That was a very pivotal summer, I think, for everyone at whatever. Yeah, because especially if you had cardinal stuff.
That was so crazy.
It was really good for me. So I was really ready for it. So it was 20.
It needed to happen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
It needed to happen.
Everything burning to the ground was what led me here. So I'm like, this was a trade up. And also, and just to talk a little woo, I felt like from that point on, I felt like I had been snatched up by a great bird and was being carried aloft. I was heading into a new orbit. Just recently, I felt like I just hit that orbit.
Woo!
I'm not kidding. I just felt like it was like August 5th, to be specifically. I was like,
nice.
Made it. What do you need to do? Nothing. You just chill out. You worked really hard to get here. Just enjoy. So, and that's the other thing that comes too on the other side of those transits is the joy on the other side. So, yeah.
That's kind of like when you stop stabbing yourself in your hand with a fork. When you stop, it feels good. Just enjoy it.
Laurie, what's the name of a word that the sound is the same as the word?
Onomatopoeia.
Right. I love when I'm smiling at Damien because his placements just wrote a tapestry of words.
Yes.
In such a display. And so because I know
yes, they do.
Right.
It is like the alliteration of the sound of his chart when he speaks sometimes the way
so much.
Yeah. And I am such a demonstrative person with my Mars and my moon and that mutual reception, which is also a square for me. And so I've got to use
a party.
Yeah. And Shelby is like tick, 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 precision.
That's just Virgo, Mercury.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's some of the reasons why. If you guys go back and like rewind and watch this, you'll see us gritting at certain times. And it's because we're hearing their placements speak.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, that's that. We love that about them.
And
So,
and
yeah.
not to disclude Andrew, because he has
No.
one of the most lovely oppositions.
Mm-hmm.
And so oppositions too is one of those things that's so slandered online. It's not
It's not a fight
Jim
club.
Carrey in Me, Myself, and or whatever, that liar having a fight with himself in the bathroom. That is not what an opposition. It's not two placements beating the shit out of each other in the bathroom. It is a place, if you imagine like two canoes, like as you grow each placement, they will meet in the middle, right?
Mhm.
We used to do this
They
thing in my hippie
synthesize.
school where, the two canoes were each singing a different song. We would sing it from across the fire. And when we got into to the middle, everybody's voice would raise and it created this incredible harmony. That is an opposition. You're meant to have that opposition because it creates incredible harmony. And if you have an opposition, then you have the expertise set up for you in whatever that harmonic opposition is, whatever those signs are, those placements, the modalities, the houses, all of it blend together, they synthesize, and they create this like symphony of harmony that's amazing for human development.
Yeah.
So-
Well, just think of it. Full moon, sun and moon are in opposition.
Mhm.
And
They're
it's
sister
complementary.
signs.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
They know each
complementary
other already in a way.
energy. Yeah.
So
They're sharing a modality and a polarity, and
Mhm.
they know how
bring
to.
us your oppositions and your squares, and we will show them
Yeah.
how to sing. We'll teach them how to
There
sing.
you go. There you go. Thanks, guys. I love this conversation. My Gemini Venus got all filled.
Oh, I love
Appreciate it.
talking about this.
I
This is
know.
I could
I
do
could
this
talk
all
about
day.
it forever.
Facts.
All right. Well, we'll do it again next week.
Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for joining the Astrologers Roundtable.
Da-da.
Are you ready to game, Andrew?
Hell
Yes,
yeah.
of course.
Go.
Game on.
Our dungeon master, take it away.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the Astrologers Roundtable with Susie, Shelby, and Damien. It's always a pleasure. And Andrew popping in as well. He's our wonderful game master. He runs a really good balanced game. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games longer than I'm going to admit to, but he's one of the best GMs I've ever played with, and he keeps us from doing ourselves in the game, but he also keeps it interesting, and he's created some really fun scenarios to play. So it's always good to get together. We're a great team. It's a pleasure to work with people who enjoy talking philosophy, spirituality, growth, personal development, and like the game. So if you're wanting to get a reading with any of those three readers, make sure you check out the show notes. You can save 20% on readings. If you're a Patreon, if you're a supporting member of the Patreon, you will save 40% off any 1-hour reading with any of our astrologers in September. All right. So that's kind of it. That's us. That's us this week. It's going to be an interesting week. If you want to move through the energy, you can't get caught up in the internet hubbub. There's been some people are so on edge, and it's so easy to want to get into a fight. And some fights are worth it if you can get a resolution. But if you're just fighting to feel righteous, if there's no resolution, it's not going to do you any good. Keyboard warrior stuff doesn't really help you. I like to do a couple of things when I'm feeling overwhelmed by the state of the world. When I'm feeling overwhelmed by the state of the world, I look for projects I can donate to, whether it's my time, talents, or money. I've done that for decades. It's a good way to put frustration to work. Sometimes I get creative. And I learned that from my daughter, Sarah. She when there were big feelings, and there were some pretty big events in her childhood, and whenever they were so big that words didn't suffice, she would need to be physically creative. And so if I had to, and there was a point in our lives where if I had to give my kid one more set of bad news, I was going to go crazy. Okay. It was so hard. And being gentle and age appropriate, and whether it was the loss of a pet, of illness in the family, a grandparent's death, her father's death, that was fun. And even his illness and years before that. And so she would look at me and she'd say, I need this material, whether it was paper and scissors and glue and paint or pastels, or it was fabric and tape and thread and a needle or yarn or whatever she needed, because she did a lot of mixed media. She's an incredible artist, actually, and always has been. That's how she funneled her feelings. And so being creative was one, I learned it from her. Like, take that angst and throw it in, take those big feelings and make something memorable out of it, a memorial of sorts to the moment. You can write, you can go take a walk. But I like putting, like, if you're really passionate about a topic, a subject, etc., you can donate your time, your talents, your finances. But I recently was watching, I think it was off the Daily Show. They had an expert in community organizing and resistance. And, signing online petitions doesn't really bring any change. It does give organizations access to your email list, and they do a lot of fundraising. But most of those change.org type petitions don't do a lot. Okay, they just don't. And so finding local community groups, to whether it's a community garden, a food pantry, a closet, community closet for people looking for work attire or clothes for kids, etc. Those are ways. Your friends at the library, uh, seeing if your county extension service needs volunteers, joining something um, that helps educate people on a variety of topics. In Washington State, they had something called WasteWise, where you looked at how waste management works, including recycling. There was Beach Watchers that did beach monitoring in the Puget Sound. Every state has an extension program, and they may be needing more volunteers right now, because those are programs that are often grant funded. So those are ways you can be a support in your community, whether it's through 4-H, FFA, Future Business Owners of America, those types of things. FBLA, I believe it is. Future Business Leaders of America, where you're helping young people gain skills. Those are all things you can be part of, and there's so many more. So if you're feeling really frustrated this week, if you just want to sock it to somebody, look at either donating to a project that makes a difference, or putting your time in, and you never know where that leads. I've met a lot of people whose careers got going in a different direction because they volunteered, in an organization. So getting involved and being involved in your community, it can be a mutually beneficial experience. But anywho, I want you to have a great week. The world is going to be worlding, and people are going to be peopling. But remember, no matter what's going on the outside, you personally can have a really good day.